Welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Alex Wolf and Gavin Shaw here, and we are joined by our good buddy Prez to get into skills that the Knicks should most be looking to develop going into the 2023 to 24 season. And no big surprise, RJ Barrett was a big topic of discussion, so much so that he got his own episodes. This whole first episode dedicated entirely to RJ Barrett right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. And we want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us a part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit that notification bell on YouTube or the auto download function on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. And if you guys want to talk even more hoops with us, check us out on Subtext. There's a link in the description, either on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. So check that out. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site The Strickland, which you can find at strick.land. He's Gavin Shaw, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. And we are joined by Prez from The Strickland. He is the co-host of the Friday edition of Pod Strickland, and also a really great draft writer, and also a guy that really loves skills of players. And so what better person to bring on for this skills-focused series of episodes? So we'll hop right into the first episode all about RJ Barrett right now. All right, and we are getting into the biggest skills that the Knicks need to work on this offseason going into next season. Of course, a big season for the Knicks this year, exceeding expectations, clearly put in a lot of work last year going into this season. Julius Randle, Jalen Brunson, Mitchell Robinson, everyone had great seasons. Manuel Quickley, Quentin Grimes, RJ Barrett even, especially towards the postseason. So clearly they did some work last offseason. Now we're going to talk about what they should work on this offseason. And of course, it's myself, Alex, and Gavin, and we are joined by our special guest, Prez, who's here to help us out. Let's see, draft guru, but let's say a development guru also, Prez. I think you were one of the most skill-focused people that I know as far as looking at basketball. So I feel like you're perfect for this episode.
Yeah, I'll take whatever accolades you want to bestow upon me, bro.
Well, this is
sure.
There we go.
Yeah. You're very slow to take that compliment, Prez. You're like, yeah, all right. I'll take it.
I mean, you got to learn to take compliments when you can. And who better to start with than of all those players that I just mentioned with regards to how they developed last year? I think one guy that a lot of us last year sort of came out outside of the postseason where I think that he did step up a lot. I think a lot of us maybe came out a little underwhelmed with RJ Barrett last year. With the overall progression of his game, there was sort of pie in the sky dreams of the Knicks having their own sort of big three with Brunson and Randle and RJ, especially once Randle started playing really well when the season started. And then things just kind of never came together for RJ for one reason or the other. His three-point shooting was all over the place throughout the year. Even just everything about his game seemed to just sort of fluctuate wildly last year, all throughout the course of the year. So independent of each other, we all came up with these skills that we thought would be interesting for the Knicks to work on. And all of us, without having any requirements of who we had to talk about, each one of us came up with something about RJ Barrett, and each of us had something different that we think that RJ Barrett should be working on. So Prez, as the guest, I'll throw it to you first. Like, what do you think the thing is that RJ Barrett should be working on?
So at the beginning of last season, the reason why I was pretty optimistic about RJ was he had a baseline of like, yeah, he struggled at some things. He had some strengths, some weaknesses, but just as long as he didn't get worse at stuff, any improvement in any of the things that he could improve on would be pretty great for his game overall. So I was like, oh, it's not like, it wasn't like, oh, like we need this horrible shooter to just become a good shooter. It was like, oh, he's been up and down, but mostly all right. And if he gets a little better, cool. If he finishes a little better, cool. If he plays a little bit better defense, cool. And then he didn't really get better at anything, and he got worse at some things. And it wasn't fun for any of us, and I'm sure it wasn't fun for RJ. So you could, at this point, pick like, it's no surprise that we each picked a different thing because there's a lot of things he can work on. The one that was top of mind for me today was his shooting, just because I'm bored. It's the off season, and we got our first RJ Barrett workout video of the year, courtesy of Drew Hanlon. And I don't know, y'all know, and for people who don't follow me on Twitter, I try to be an armchair like shop mechanics analyzer person with varying degrees of success. And RJ, I like to think I'm pretty good at it by now, but RJ has always kind of stumped me as to like, if you ask me like, what about his shot makes it so it doesn't go in? I've never really been able to quite nail that down, but I do know that at least in the video today, there were some changes that seemed intentional. In terms of how his arms were angled in the shot, that it looked a little better. In the past, when we've gotten RJ offseason videos, I'm like, is it different? I don't know. Is it intentional? I don't know. Ultimately, we'll have a better idea soon because FIBA starts up and he's going to be playing for Canada. So we'll get to see RJ hoops very soon. But if he could just get back to being like respectable floor spacer, even if he doesn't have to be Buddy Hield, but if he's just respectable out there, that'd just be huge for Randall and Brunson and Quickly and just our ball handlers in particular. Because by the end of last season, like we saw what the Heat did, like they were just ignoring him, and like they ignored Josh Hart too, but it's more glaring for RJ because RJ takes a lot of threes. He's not shy. He just bricks a lot. So we just gotta deal with all these plays where he's just like alone out there bricking, and it's just like, what if he made them a little bit? So hopefully he starts knocking them down like he did in seasons past.
Prez, I gotta ask. This is a very specific question, so I don't blame you if you don't have an answer off the top of your head for it. But are the changes you're seeing now in his jump shot a continuation of like kind of what was hyped at the beginning of the playoffs, where he like went off, worked with Drew a little bit, and obviously came out in that Cavs series and initially was hot, even if he ultimately finished the playoff shooting the same percentage he did during the regular season?
That's a great question, and for people who don't know what Gavin is mentioning, Drew Hanlon, one of RJ's main trainers, a little bit before the playoffs, had a very cryptic tweet about, it sounds like one of those internet pop-up ads, like one quick change or whatever. They don't want you, scientists don't want you to know this or whatever. And he didn't say what it was, but he said like, oh, we worked on this thing, and now in the last 3 games, RJ has shot the ball well or whatever. And as you might guess, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the hell it was, and I was unable to. That's not to say that he didn't change something. He probably did. But I don't know what the hell it was, so I have no idea if this is the same or different or what.
It's all about how he flicked his pinky or something. It's got to be something extremely minute at that point. I mean, it might literally be to the point at this point of hand positioning or something.
Yeah. There's plenty of stuff that like you can change, and we just, unless you have like a close-up camera, like you won't be able to tell.
Yeah. And I mean, so much of it too with RJ, I feel like this describes so many of the Knicks too, but something about it has always just felt like it's between his ears as well. Like the form always looks good, and it just seems like it must just be some minute thing that he starts overanalyzing right at the end of the shooting mechanic that makes it not go in the way it should. Because in theory, I mean, he loads it up pretty much the same every time, and then it's just when it comes off his hand, it's just that minute amount off that it can't be if you want it to go in. And that's the frustrating part with him is like it's almost like when Grimes goes through a cold spell too, and you just look at him and you're like, how? How could you ever go through a cold spell? Your form is picturesque. You're like what they teach kids to shoot like, like just perfect up and down, like repeatable, whatever. And then sometimes Grimes just goes through these spells, like even did in the postseason, where it's just like the form is there and it looks like it should go in, and then it just doesn't. And you're just like, well, what is the thing that's not working here? Like,
That's why it's always been frustrating with the RJs, because like,
Mhm,
yeah, he was a horrible shooter last year. Like every
mhm.
single metric, simple or advanced, has him like among 294 players, RJ Barrett ranked 290th or whatever. And but like it's not like he don't look like Michael Kidd Gilchrist out here. He's
Mhm.
fat, doesn't look that busted. It just sucks. And that definitely totally makes it worse as like a fan watching, because it just does not compute.
All right, we'll be right back in talking about more RJ Barrett with Prez in just a second, including what we think RJ Barrett could become as a player going forward, and what we think his ceiling is, what we think the archetype he should sort of be trying to slot into is, whether he needs to sort of take a step back from trying to become a superstar at this point. So there's a lot to talk about. But first, I got to remind you all, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's 200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to get the first home run. All on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And, gotta love the Mets right now. Maybe you could bet on how many players will still be on the Mets after the trade deadline with the ferocious speed that they're going with right now. Who knows? I guess we'll see. So sign up today and visit fanduel.com/locked on to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's fanduel.com/locked on. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
And the weird thing about it, right, is the direction that it's going, right? Second year, he was at 40%.
Right.
Year after, he was at 34.5%. And then I think coming into last season, we're like, all right, if he settles in at 36%, like that is totally. And I think when you were talking about this earlier,
Yeah.
Bryce, probably what you were referencing, like, hey, if he's a 36% shooter on volume, that's awesome. That's great. That's good enough that like in the playoffs, what happened shouldn't have happened, and like the Heat were gonna have to cover him. And like the thing is, like in the playoffs, like I said before, he was the same. Like he was a little bit better. He was 1.5% better. Everyone else typically shoots worse during the playoffs, and that came with like a couple, like what was he in Game 6? He was like 1 for 10 from the field, probably like 0 for 5 from 3. Like he had some stinkers in there, so you can't wipe those out. But if you want to wipe those out, you could say it's some great games. But I guess like where I'd want to go with this is like, where do you think the shooting has to get to for him to be? And obviously the Knicks' long-term goal is to get a player better than Julius Randle and RJ next to Brunson, but at least for like the next like 2 seasons, if it is that long, like for him to be the third banana, or if you just exchange Randle out for someone else, for him to be the long-term third banana, like where does the shooting ultimately have to get to for you?
Probably like what you said. He just has to. It makes such a big difference if he's just respectable, because all of a sudden that's one defender that's not in the paint. That's a couple more points every game. That opens his driving lanes a little bit more, gives him a little more room to pass. Like it just has a trickle down effect. So for him to like really, for it to be beyond just nice and like impactful, I would say the volume he's at. So in addition to not making threes last year, he also, either because of the misses or because of just this was the team's game plan, he pretty much only took spot up and catch and shoot threes. The year before, when he shot 36%, he started dabbling a little bit in off the dribble threes, especially in the second half of the year when we just gave him like crazy usage as the season was winding down. And he wasn't like amazing at it, but anytime you have to make the defense think, oh, he might put it on the deck and he still might shoot a three, then that's just another opportunity for the defense to make a mistake. So I guess beyond just being solid at catch and shoot, if he just was, like you said, 37-ish%, 38% on overall, and then, high 30s on catch and shoot, and then a credible threat to do like some pull-up shooting. And it doesn't got to be crazy stuff. It's just like, oh, I got a screen and I have to take one dribble because they went under the screen because I'm RJ Barrett and they don't respect me. I can shoot that. Like, just enough to make them think about that. Like, you don't even have to be particularly great at those for it to be effective. You could be like 33% on those, and if you're taking, one of those a game, that'll go a long way. So that's what I would say. Back to being a reliable, legit, solid spot up shooter, and then dabbling in pull up shooting that doesn't make you want to like torch your eyeballs.
Yeah, I think I have sort of a direction I want to take this discussion that's a little off of just the skill that I picked out here. But so I'll give like my rationale on this because I think that sort of leads, like what you were just talking about, leads into what I want to talk about as far as my skill for RJ. So when I was thinking about it, I was like, I think the finishing and the free throw drawing he needs to work on. And I think we started to see some strides in that. Now, surprisingly, it felt like during the playoffs that he made sort of a leap in this, but he actually got a little worse at the rim in the playoffs, and actually a little worse at drawing fouls, apparently, according to Cleaning the Glass. So, like, at the rim, he was 59% during the regular season last year, which was the best number he's put up, but still only 24th percentile for a wing, which is not exactly what you want to see. And then in the playoffs, he was 55% at the rim, so 4% worse, and that put him at 19th percentile for wings. But foul drawing, he's gotten really, really good. And I mean, I say gotten, like, he's been pretty good like his whole career at foul drawing, but I think he's gotten better at this point. 15.4% of his shot attempts he gets fouled on, and that's 95th percentile in the NBA. He did that all of last year. And then during the playoffs, that went up to 16%, which was 93rd percentile. So actually, with the increase of guys getting to the rim and whatever in the playoffs, I guess that the threshold became a little higher when you're in the same playoffs as like Jimmy Butler, as far as what percentile you're going to rank in while drawing fouls getting in. But I mean, those are fantastic numbers. And like his free throw shooting has gotten a decent amount better. Like that is one curve that you can see getting consistently better throughout his career, which is good. He's almost up to 75% after last year, and he shot 77% in the playoffs. Of course, had that I think it was game 6 against the Heat where he drew like 8 free throws just in the first quarter alone. So he's got that kind of potential. The reason that I highlighted that as a skill and not something related to the shooting, and maybe I'll throw this to you guys to see what you think. I'm starting to reach a point with RJ, and I know this will probably get me lit up in YouTube comments or whatever. Like, how dare you're giving up on this guy? He's only 22 years old, blah, 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 only 23 years old, however the hell old he is at this point. But like, I'm starting to reach a point where, and there's nothing wrong with this, where I'm starting to just think, hey, I think maybe if RJ just focuses in on essentially being a good like catch and shoot, like stationary 3-point shooter, and then continues working on these the stuff where he drives in and just generates fouls and can learn to finish better on the inside. I think there's an outline of a really good player there that maybe just isn't like a mega star, and that's okay. And that's sort of where I'm starting to go to with him. I just don't know. Like, we're now 4 years into his career, and I feel like we're not seeing the pull-up shooting and the self-created shooting come together like we thought maybe it could if he were to become like a megastar. And I'm sort of just coming to peace with that. And maybe that is me like throwing in the towel too early, but I think at this point I would kind of be happy with his career and his career arc if he started just zeroing in on like those micro skills at this point and saying like, I can still be like an 18 to 20 point per game scorer without trying to act as alpha E as I have in the past. And that might solve some of like the issues that we see where like he and Julius don't necessarily have the best shared court numbers and stuff like that. I think because there's this constant kind of like tug of war, either spoken or unspoken, about like, whose turn it is or whatever, like that sort of thing when both of them are on the floor. And maybe this is the way that like his career can kind of progress, and that this like trio of him and Brunson and Randall can sort of keep gelling and get better. But like, I don't know, Gavin, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think as long as he's becomes a good spot up shooter, he can be on this team long term. If he doesn't, like, I don't think he can. To me, it's as simple as that. Like, everything else is gravy, to your point. Like, I would love for him to have a mid-range game. I'd love for him to hit like 1 or 2 off the dribble threes every game. But if he can do that, we saw, and I'm sure Prez is something you want to touch on too. Like, I thought the processing got genuinely better from him the second half of the season. And maybe like, I don't know. Sometimes I think he would just see the pass like earlier in his career and just decide not to make it. So maybe it was as simple as him being a little bit more unselfish. Like his assist to usage ratio still like isn't that good. And it went up like 20 percentile like points in the playoffs, and it still wasn't really above average. But like, I think we all clearly saw like he was making better decisions. He was becoming just more tolerable to play with, which I think is an underrated part of all this. And like, there's some element, I've talked about this largely in the past before, just of self-awareness there, like where he's at on the team. And I think like Jalen is clearly number one in the hierarchy. And to your point, Alex, like in the past, like there was some debate, like, all right, is RJ like the golden child? Is like Julius the golden child now? Like he's clearly third in that pecking order. And then it gets complicated a little bit in the playoffs when Julius gets hurt. And all of a sudden you're like, all right, you do need those ancillary skills for RJ. But as this team continues to develop, as expectations continue to get higher, there's almost less room for him to play around with those things. And he's forced to just lean into his strengths because this is a team that is absolutely trying to win. So I'm fine if he does just that. But if the spot up shooting isn't there, I don't know if the rest of it matters. And I think at a certain point, you maybe have to trade him in for a less talented player whose skill set is just a cleaner fit. But Prez, like, what do you think the balance is there between him like continuing to like poke and prod to expand his game and also just contributing to winning, which was obviously in the regular season? Like, I think there was a pretty clear case like that you could argue he was the Knicks' worst rotation player.
Yeah, I'd say he was the Knicks' worst rotation player for sure. At least after Evan Fournier and D Rose were removed from the rotation.
Yeah, post management.
Yeah, exactly. Once we got our affairs in order. That's a good question. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think you can develop those kind of skills while doing more role playery stuff on the court, particularly because RJ, like, pretty much he might share the third spot on the pecking order with IQ, or IQ might pass him. Or, maybe Grimes has a big breakout, or maybe we start getting, like, at the end of the season when we had Josh Hart started closing games over RJ Barrett. But at the end of the day, RJ Barrett still averaged the third most minutes, right, on the team. So as long as he gets the ball, nobody's going to be like calling for a bunch of isolations for RJ or something, but like he'll have chances to put it on the deck and explore and practice some of this stuff for better or for worse. I don't think it would be up to him really to be like, I'm just going to do less, right? Like the way our team operates, which like having guys who can drive all the time and the offensive rebounds and all that. Like, I think we kind of just have to deal with this, and so does he. He has to kind of just sink or swim, which is why I kind of always have said I would, RJ's still super young, to y'all's point from earlier, and it's not that I don't think he can develop. I just think it'll be more likely to happen on another team, or there's a good chance it can happen on another team, because the role might be different, or the team structure might be different. Maybe he has more freedom or less freedom. I don't know. And to your other point, something I wanted to hit on, I know I picked spot up shooting for my thing, but I actually think the most important thing for him is the passing and the reads that you were talking about. Like that series versus Cleveland, one of the real stupid things I think that Cleveland did, although I understand why they did it, because Jalen Brunson and Mitchell Robinson were destroying them, is they packed the paint like 4, sometimes even 5 people. And that meant when RJ Barrett drove, he didn't have to make a read. He could just be like, someone's open out there.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a quick scan of the floor like a quarterback and find him. And he was really good at it. And against the Heat, they didn't pack the paint quite like that. They did sometimes, but he didn't. They didn't do it quite as obviously as Cleveland, which made the passing a little harder. But my hope is that the playoff series kind of showed him that, like, oh, I can like always like this driving kick is gonna be there for me because I'm so good at driving. Like I've tweeted about this, but hit the percentage of passes and assists he has on drives is really low for somebody who drives more than 10 times a game. Like the only players who pass less than him on drives are SGA, John Morant, and no, SGA, Zion, and Giannis. So like big hulking driving nuclear bombs basically. And I'm like, it's no offense to RJ to say you not like them. So just if he just kicked the ball out or passed on his drives, not even a crazy high rate, just a normal average rate.
Yeah.
Man, our offense would be humming like crazy because the one thing you can count on RJ to do is get into the paint. And even no matter how bad his finishing is, like if someone's driving into the paint, the other team's going to get scared and probably freak out at least some of the time. So if he can do that, I think it makes him less dependent on taking hard shots. It makes the defenses more scared. It gives our shooters more chances to shoot. So that would be like my number one thing. If I found a genie lamp specific for RJ Barrett and it only had one wish, that's what I would say.
Yeah, last season, 24th percentile in the NBA in assist to usage ratio in the regular season, 44th percentile in the playoffs, which to be clear is actually like more in line with what he's done in his career, but his actual number in the playoffs was higher than he's ever put up in his career. So like anything close to like it was almost a stunning transformation. Like we were coming on these post-game pods after the games and being like, oh wow, he made the right pass. Oh, he did it again. He did it again. And like to Prez's point, like there was like something about the success that I think became kind of contagious. And he was like, all right, like this is working. It feels good. I'm going to keep doing it. And like, I'm weirdly confident, even though his development has never been linear, that like at least that inclination is going to carry into next season.
Yeah, I could see that too. I mean, at least I hope so. You know what I mean? I guess that all sort of goes into what, like Prez, what you just said a second ago, like realizing that he's not that dude. You know what I mean? Like, I think that that's my greatest hope for him from a not just pinpointing a skill perspective this offseason is just sort of the self-assessment where he says, I can be a really good NBA player if I set aside thinking that I have to be like one of the top guns. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Yeah, like not thinking that he has to be on the level of like Randall or Brunson, like as far as how much usage he's going to be carrying and just focusing, like zooming in from like the macro of like I have to be a superstar into the micro of like I just have to make the right plays and try to like maximize every time I touch the ball and not expect a certain number of touches, you know, like just focus on making the most of everyone that I do get. Like I know they're like completely different players, but I think that there's something to potentially looking at like his fellow Canadian and Andrew Wiggins, who went from a guy who was like high usage, probably had, you know, I don't think this is a hot take to say had more raw talent, you know, than RJ, was kind of handed the keys in Minnesota, you know, and given tons of shot attempts and everything else and was putting up the counting stats numbers and whatever. And yet eventually became a guy that was undesirable because it was like, well, how much is this leading to winning and whatever, and then gets effectively salary dumped to Golden State and turns everything around by just being like, you know what, I'm good at like a number of things. Why don't I just like, and this is probably a product of Steve Kerr and that fantastic system there, but like, just sort of zeroing in on like, okay, this is what I'm good at. Like, so why don't I just focus in on this stuff? And then I could be a key part of a team with some really talented, like alpha guys on it and still play a huge role and still contribute big time to winning and be like a huge player on a championship winning team. Like, I think that maybe that's eventually where RJ's career goes. Now, maybe we're still a few years away from that, but Prez, to your point too, whether that's on the Knicks or on some other team, I think, to me, if I were going to like try to crystal ball it and figure out where he's headed, I think that's sort of the path that I would see him eventually going down, of like the Wiggins, or trying to think like who are some other players that this is sort of, who had higher expectations that eventually kind of tempered them. I don't know. Wiggins just comes.
I mean, if you want to go another Warrior, like guys like Iguodala and Livingston, kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, Iguodala Finals MVP, so I guess you could say he did it all, but like he was the number one scorer early in his career, and that,
or even like Harrison Barnes, who went from role on Golden State to bigger role elsewhere, and then sort of slotting back into a smaller role again with Sacramento and really contributing, to winning there, like maybe something like that. But yeah,
the funny thing about RJ is I feel like when we say like he needs to be more self-aware, we're really talking about the stuff near the hoop with taking bad shots and passing, right? Because he's not like the unself-aware player who's taking like fadeaway, like Jordan fadeaways,
no,
right?
He's not J.R. Smith.
he really doesn't take that many mid-range jump shots.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned earlier, he almost eliminated off the dribble threes entirely from his game. So he's not really taking, like, he does get the ball a lot and he does call his own number often, but it's not really in the superstar-y kind of way that we're used to. It's just like, and this is the other thing, is our whole team's shtick is everybody just charge the paint. So, Tibbs is always talking about like, yes, we have to drive a lot, but also you have to make the right read. So they just need to like tell RJ to emphasize. They need to tell RJ, hey, you're gonna collapse the defense, find the shooters, and challenge him to average 5 assists or something like that. Because right now we're already good at the whole like everybody drive to the paint and Mitch will clean up. We're great at that. You don't need to tell. Like, it was clear last year that was the instructions for everybody. Like IQ, who is, he's score first, but he's a good passer in his own right. Even IQ was like, no, I'm going straight to the hole. Like by the end of the season, like he put his head down quite a lot and passed up threes to drive many times, even in late in the season in the playoffs, and even late in the season before the playoffs when he was cooking. So, part of it is on RJ to realize, hey, like I gotta use my ability to drive for more than just scoring. And then part of it to me is on the Knicks for being like, yeah, I know our whole stick is like, we can't turn the ball over if we don't pass, and we can only get offensive rebounds if we take shots near the rim. But they need to dial that mentality back from like a 10 to like a 8 or 9, or else, both for RJ and for the entire team, to me. So that's one of those things where like, if RJ himself, I don't think RJ's self, I mean, maybe the playoffs change something in him and we see him naturally begin to kick the ball out more. But what I'm worried about is like, if the coaches don't make him do this, then he won't do it. That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, and I think my lingering concern is also like, I mean, something we haven't touched on yet, and I don't even know if we were planning on, but his defense, which I thought was pretty horrible throughout the regular season. And then during the playoffs, like again, I test wise, maybe not watching the games 4 times like Tibbs, but I thought it got better. And like, definitely there was some real defensive playmaking there. And yet, and look, and like, you could maybe attribute this largely to him sharing his minutes with Jalen Brunson, but the defense was 5.5 points worse when he was on the floor in the playoffs. Like, despite him feeling better, their offense was 11 points worse, because to Prez's point, like, even when RJ was shooting pretty well and Quentin Grimes couldn't make a shot to save his life, teams are still guarding Quentin Grimes and teams are not guarding RJ Barrett. So that's like, Alex, to like your point on like his ultimate destiny, like whether it's on the Knicks or on another team with him taking a step back, like he still has to, like, that it's great on paper, but like he has to figure out those skills, which is like is the shooting, but it's also his defense. And the Knicks all of last year, like at times would just like tank when RJ and Brunson would share the floor, because like Prez, I think this was something you and Schwinn were talking about, if I remember correctly, like heading into the playoffs, they just couldn't survive having 2 bad defenders on the floor. And that's where, like, when we talk about RJ's long-term future on the team, that's where I always get stuck. Like, I think at some point, unless he gets way better on that end, that's going to be the thing that ultimately pushes the Knicks to say, like, all right, we just got to flip him for something.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. And I think that's probably a good point to end the RJ discussion on, and then get into some of these other skills that we picked out, because we did all independently pick out an RJ skill, but we also picked out 2 more skills each. So let's get into some more skills here. All right, that's it for today. We will be back tomorrow with another episode, continuing this discussion with Prez, and in fact, back the day after that too. This is a 3-part episode that we're bringing to you. On tomorrow's edition, we'll be talking about Jalen Brunson's 3-point shooting, Deuce's 3-point shooting, and if that can turn him into a rotation player. And a thing that lots of people talk about, even when he's good, Julius Randle's defense. So that's all coming up on tomorrow's show. But for today, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you all soon. Peace out, everybody.